Hey everyone, and welcome back. You guys sent in some really fascinating stuff from Dr. Jose Cisneros this time around, his work on couple relationships in the 21st century. Yeah, couple relationships in the 21st century. Changes, challenges, and strategies. Catchy, right?
Well, he
Yeah.
certainly doesn't shy away from a bold title.
Not at all. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? To take a deep dive into how relationships have transformed and maybe see if we can make sense of it all. And the best part is, this isn't just for those of us on the lookout for the one. This deep dive, it can be just as insightful whether you're happily coupled up, flying solo, or, somewhere in between.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Cisneros, he kicks things off by painting a pretty vivid picture of just how much things have changed. Remember the whole Leave It to Beaver kind of model?
Hmm.
Meet in your early 20s, get hitched, the whole 9 yards.
The good old days when things were uh, simpler.
Right. Well, not so much anymore. Dr. Cisneros argues that we're kind of more in this Sex and the City era now. Relationships are fluid, commitment, well, that's a whole other conversation, and marriage.
Marriage is more like, what, an option on the menu now, not the entire meal.
Exactly. And, it's easy to look at that and think, oh, relationships are doomed. But here's the thing.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Dr. Cisneros points out that just because marriage rates are down, it doesn't actually mean people are shying away from relationships altogether.
Interesting. So it's not about avoiding connection entirely. So what is it then?
Well, it seems like the whole definition of a successful relationship, it's definitely broadened, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. We see it all the time, right? More people are choosing cohabitation long-term partnerships, but without necessarily tying the knot. And then there's the whole idea of consciously choosing to be single.
Right. It's like the whole script has been flipped. So is this just a Western thing, this shift in how we view relationships?
Not at all. In fact, anthropologists, they've been observing this trend across all sorts of cultures.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, take, for example, certain Himalayan communities. They practice something called walking marriages. Basically, individuals can have multiple partners throughout their lives.
Multiple partners.
Yeah, and it's not seen as anything unusual. They really prioritize emotional connection and flexibility in their relationships.
Wow, that's fascinating. It really challenges our preconceived notions about, what a committed relationship should look like.
Exactly. It really highlights how much our cultural background shapes our view of relationships.
It makes you wonder how many other ways of doing things are out there. So it seems like we're seeing a global shift here, moving away from those rigid societal structures and towards something a lot more adaptable. Makes you think, right, have you noticed this kind of shift in your own life? So we've tossed out the old rule book, right? But the big question is, why? Why are we seeing this global shift in how we approach relationships? Dr. Cisneros, he's got some thoughts on that, and some of them might surprise you.
Oh, I bet. He always brings up some thought-provoking ideas.
Right. So he dives into this thing called parental investment theory. And I have to admit, when I first heard about this, it kind of blew my mind a little.
I can imagine. It's not exactly something you learn in your average relationship advice column.
Totally. So in a nutshell, it suggests that the sex that invests more in raising their offspring,
Right, right.
they tend to be way more selective when choosing a mate. Makes sense, right?
Absolutely. It's like, from a purely biological standpoint, the stakes are just higher for one sex than the other.
Exactly. And, in most species, including us humans, that's historically been, well, females, right?
Right. When you think about pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding,
Yeah, all of that.
I mean, talk about a major investment of time and energy.
No kidding. So from an evolutionary perspective, it makes total sense that females would be hardwired to seek out partners who, have the resources and the commitment to support them and their future family.
I totally agree, yeah.
And what I find fascinating is how this plays out in the 21st century. Because Dr. Cisneros, he argues that women today, especially those who are super educated or have these amazing careers, they're not necessarily looking for a partner to, be the sole breadwinner. It's more nuanced than that.
Right. They want a partner, not a provider.
Exactly. It's more about finding someone who brings other equally important qualities to the table. Like, what about emotional intelligence, shared values, and of course, someone who's willing to share the load when it comes to, parenting or household stuff.
It's about partnership in the truest sense of the word, right?
100%. But here's the thing, and Dr. Cisneros brings this up, along with evolutionary psychologist David Buss, men, while they obviously care about all those amazing qualities,
Yeah.
they might still place a higher value on, how do I put this? Physical attractiveness. especially when it comes to long-term relationships.
Okay, interesting. So how do we square that with everything else we've been talking about?
Well, it kind of circles back to that whole evolutionary wiring thing. Youthfulness, physical attractiveness, those have always been associated with, fertility and reproductive potential.
Ah, so even in the 21st century, those primal instincts are still kind of lurking in the background.
It's like our biology trying to play catch up with our modern values. But hey, it's not to say that men are just totally superficial, right? It's more like those ancient hardwired preferences, they're just part of this complex equation.
Exactly. We're not just slaves to our biology, thankfully. We're these super complex beings shaped by all these different forces, social norms, personal experiences, cultural influences, and all of those things. They come together to shape what we look for in a partner.
Right. And I love how Dr. Cisneros puts it. He says, understanding these underlying dynamics, it's not about judging anyone, it's about self-awareness. It's about navigating the dating landscape with just a little bit more insight. Speaking of navigating the dating landscape, Dr. Cisneros, he brings up another really interesting trend, and it's this whole thing about the education gap.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Right. So he and researcher David Buss, they both point out that more women are graduating from universities now than ever before.
It's true. And it's kind of creating this fascinating dynamic in the dating world.
Tell me more.
Well, think about it. When you have this large pool of highly educated women, and they're looking for partners who, share their intellectual curiosity, their drive.
Yeah, yeah.
It can lead to this, a more competitive landscape, especially in certain social circles.
It's tough out there.
It is. And it kind of ties into what Dr. Cisneros was talking about earlier, about the challenges educated women might be facing. It's like this paradox, right? They're told to pursue their ambitions, get those degrees, but then
it can feel like the dating pool shrinks.
exactly. It's this balancing act between wanting a partner who values intellectual stimulation and, ambition, but also dealing with these societal expectations that don't always quite line up.
So what do we do? How do we navigate this new reality?
Well, Dr. Cisneros, he's got some ideas. He suggests, and I think this is key, that we might all need to be a little more flexible with those relationship checklists we carry around.
Oh, you mean like ditching the whole must-have list?
Exactly. And I don't just mean superficial stuff like job titles or, how much money someone makes. He's talking about going deeper than that. He wants us to focus on cultivating what he calls mate value.
Mate value. Okay, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So it's like this combination of qualities that truly make someone a fantastic partner. And we're talking empathy, a sense of humor, shared values, emotional intelligence, kindness, that ability to really communicate.
It's about the heart of the person.
Yes. And Dr. Cisneros, he argues that these qualities, they're ultimately way more important for long-term relationship success than just, checking off boxes on some predetermined list.
So it's about depth, not just like achievements.
Exactly. And you know what? This whole idea of mate value, it actually leads to another really interesting point that Dr. Cisneros brings up. He quotes the philosopher Schopenhauer, who believed that solitude, being alone, it could actually be a source of great strength and creativity.
Oh, I love that. So are you saying we shouldn't be afraid to be single?
Exactly. It's not about being alone and lonely. It's about, being comfortable in your own skin. It's about pursuing those passions that light you up, nurturing your friendships, just becoming the best, most authentic version of yourself.
And by doing that, by focusing on our own personal growth and self-discovery,
we actually become even more attractive partners in the long run.
it's like that whole saying, you have to love yourself first.
Exactly. Instead of desperately searching for someone to, complete us.
Which never works, by the way.
Never. It's about becoming whole and fulfilled as individuals on our own terms. And then you meet someone and it's this amazing bonus, not something you need to feel complete.
I love that. What an empowering message. So as we wrap up this deep dive into love in the 21st century, what's the biggest takeaway you hope our listeners are left thinking about?
I think the big takeaway here is that relationships, they're not one size fits all anymore. It's not about following some outdated rule book. It's about understanding those societal shifts, our own biology, and most importantly, our own evolving needs and desires.
It's about writing your own love story.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe by rewriting the rules, By embracing this choose-your-own-adventure approach, we might just discover something even more fulfilling than we ever imagined.
Totally. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for taking us on this incredible journey into the heart of modern love. And hey, to everyone listening, keep those deep thoughts flowing. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.